Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation. Welcome back to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show. I am your host, Nick of Wigan. And I am joined by Mr. Mark Ferguson. Mark, how are you, my friend?
I thought I joined the Conor McGregor podcast then. Did something happen last week, Nick? I've got no idea. Did something happen?
I was on the verge of changing my handle for this show to Nick of Winning rather than Nick of Wigan like it usually is.
That would have been good. That would have been good.
But had to make an entrance after what happened last week. So for the listeners who aren't aware, I won some money last week, Mark. I went and won the Ashes $1,000 contest, the big Sunday contest, $1,000 for the winner. But not only that I didn't think that was enough, so I went and cleaned up in the Nat Coombs $50 contest as well, and took the winnings home there as well. So, I mean, we'll come to it. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. If you'd not seen Twitter this week,
Make aware, brilliant.
Yeah, got to make people aware of the successes. How was your week, Mark?
Well, it definitely wasn't sunglasses worthy. Small amount of wins. But to be honest, we were enjoying your win so much, weren't we? We were on the old WhatsApp. We were kind of monitoring it all the time. We tried not to jinx it for you as well. And after what happened a few weeks earlier, where I told you would have won $1 million and you didn't, I definitely didn't want to say anything because I think it was really also. The way it happened is you had a lot of early players, didn't you? All your players were early game players, were they? Is that right?
Yeah. So
yeah,
I didn't have anyone playing in the late games. Every player was early, and the closest that could catch me when I was sort of watching it all unfold. Obviously, you can't see the players until the games start. As it was all unfolding, the closest to me had 2 players remaining, and the 2 players he was about 25 to 30 points back from what I recall. And the 2 players he had remaining were Ellinger from the Colts, and he also had Van Jefferson from the Rams in his flex. So that couldn't really have gone any better, because Van Jefferson had a donut, 0, and Ellinger basically didn't really do anything at all. I think he finished single figures. I'm not even sure if he reached 5. So yeah, once I'd seen the players, I felt a little bit easier about it, especially like a quarter in when it got to the half. I was thinking, it would take a minor miracle for him to turn this around now and catch me. I'm actually going to share the winning lineup, Mark, because we talk on this show about strategy and the different ways of playing DFS and how you should and shouldn't build your line and stuff like that. But ultimately, what do we always say? It comes down to luck. We don't have crystal balls, obviously. It's dependent on what happens on the Sunday. And I will be brutally honest, and I'm not just saying this. I was out with friends, with the missus. We went for some what we call tea. I guess it's what's called dinner down south. We went out for some dinner, and I threw this lineup together on the spur of the moment. I almost forgot. I'd reserved my spot, but I almost forgot to put a lineup in. So this lineup had very little research. A glance once I'd put it together to make sure I was happy with it. And when you look at the ownership on some of the players, this is almost like what we sort of tell people not to do. When you look at some of these ownerships, like Tua 23%, Foreman 23%, Tyreek Hill 30%, Hopkins 22%, DJ Moore 25%. Those are fairly high ownerships. There's only a couple that are actually in single figures. One was Garrett Wilson, who has a really good game at 20.5. The other one was the Bears D, who were the only one to stink it up on the day, which was a complete punt anyway. I was just punting on, maybe we get Dallas there, maybe not living up to expectation, which we've seen in previous seasons does happen. But any listeners, like, this just goes to show that you can build your lineup however you want to build your lineup, because when it does come down to that Sunday, you need an element of luck for that lineup to win. And I definitely had some luck on my side for this lineup to win. I might not be having this conversation now if the guy below me, for example, had a different quarterback in them late games, or even a different flex player. DJ Moore goes and catches that touchdown right at the end of the game. That sort of catapulted my score even further. So without things like that happening, maybe this doesn't take home the 1,000, but I think there's a lot that gets said on social media about how you should build your line, what's right, what's wrong by so-called experts. I don't profess to be an expert in DFS, but I will tell anyone this is a prime example of you can build a lineup by, you don't even need to spend a massive amount of time on it. Go with your gut, go with what looks good, apply a little bit of logic to it, hence the stacks. And you've got just as good a chance as anyone else, because ultimately you're not the one throwing or catching the ball on the Sunday, it's the players.
Yep, quite right. It's funny you started saying we haven't prepped for this show, but this week I wanted to talk about a little bit about the rules of DFS that social media point to people, and how they don't apply really anymore. And I'll explain why in a second after we just talked about this. But we'll probably do a bit more detail on ownership in another show. But this is a classic example of the thing I was talking about, I think with you, Nick, on week 4 show, I think it was. The ownership isn't really that important. It's more about the combinations of the players under that ownership. For example, you've got there Donta Foreman and DJ Moore without PJ Walker. How many people were ever going to, even though they're 23 and 25%, how many lineups are going to have those two in that format, without, following, because it's not following the rules, is it? So, one running back, one wide receiver. And this is just a classic example of it. You've got no bring back. I did that rather cheeky tweet about you being an idiot gets lucky winning or something because you don't follow the rules and stuff and all that. And it's the same stuff we talk about every week, Nick. This isn't a me thing. This is a you and me thing for definite. It kind of, we get sick and tired of it, don't we? Like these, people saying you have to make your lineups a certain way, and it's just not true. The reason you don't see more lineups like this winning is because not so many people build these lineups. The top 100 optimal lineups every week are probably nobody picks them, and they're probably really weird looking. And I think this is a great example of you just pick who you want to pick. You got the small bit. Yeah, exactly. Jack's point there and stuff. Tell me a single person, single expert, a single show that's telling you to choose 2 Jets receivers without the quarterback and stuff. Nobody. It doesn't happen. But one of the reasons that I think this is, we kind of jumped in this a little bit early, the strategy piece, but like one of the reasons for this is I think a lot of those rules were created when the NFL was different. We've definitely talked about that before on here, haven't we? About how teams like to run the score now and stuff. But secondly, more importantly, DraftKings changed the way they did their pricing. For example, I think you'll remember this, Nick. Jordan, who's not here this week, I think he'd probably be here too. He's been playing relatively recently, so wouldn't have understood this. But the quarterbacks were always a lot cheaper, always a lot cheaper, going back 2 or 3 years. Like a quarterback would have to be really good to be over $6K, never more than 7.
Yeah.
A backup running back would be 3,000 something, because the running back now minimum is 4, but it used to be 3, and they never used to make the backups that highly priced like they do now. Like if Zeke was 6 or 7, Pollard would have been 3.5, and Donta Foreman last week would have been 3 and 3.2 or something like that in the old days. And all of these rules about you've got to do this, and this all come from that era where the pricing was completely different. And so it just doesn't apply anymore, I don't think. The things with the stacks, I mean, you just have to look. Stochastic did an article on this a while back. Look at they did some simulations and stuff on that. And the stack stuff, said no need for a bring back, for example. Statistically, there's no reason to have a bring back, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think people, stacks are good for GPPs because, correlation is good. It creates variance, so you have to be prepared to lose because of it. But we talked about that before as well. If you're going to win, this lineup is going to win. It's going to have to also lose as well. The ability to lose anyway. And I think that this is just a great example of something we've been talking about. Well, ever since we started doing the show, Nick, whenever that was 2 years ago or whatever. Don't follow the rule. Don't have to follow the rules. Just pick the players you want to play.
Yeah, definitely. I think interesting point, like you said, Mark, about Deonta Foreman being in there as well as DJ Moore. We mentioned it a few weeks ago. It probably was week 4, but where is the season going at all? But you mentioned about when you're constructing your lineup, you want to be unique. Basically, I think someone had asked the question about leaving spare funds, and what are the kind of ways where you can get unique with your lineup. And we've spoke before about maybe looking at like having 2 tight ends in your lineup, having a tight end in your flex. A lot of people don't do that. In this instance, the Panthers haven't been fantastic this year. DJ Moore's had his struggles. Foreman comes in at a time where McCaffrey's just gone. They're playing the Falcons. It's a game that you probably expect them to be at least competitive in. We don't know which way the game's going to go. But you probably don't anticipate that kind of workload from him, because for most of the game, from what I recall, the Falcons were leading, which normally lends more to the receivers. But the fact that those two were both in and performed as well as they did, without anything else in the lineup, that alone would have made this a quite unique lineup, I would have thought. So like you said, the actual ownership doesn't necessarily matter. The fact that the combination of those two players was in. And do you know what? I would do the same again this week. And I'm not saying this is how I'm going to build my lineup, but just as an example, I saw enough from Travis Etienne last week in London that I'd be quite confident playing him alongside someone like Christian Kirk, for example. I'd be quite confident in playing a Tony Pollard alongside a CD Lamb. And I think as well, that's in part down to how the running back position has changed. I think you're seeing a lot more backs now that are coming into the league with the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. So even if they don't have a fantastic day rushing, your likes of your Ecklers, your ETNs, they're still going to be, McCaffrey, they're still going to be involved massively in the game, whether they're running the ball or whether they're catching the ball. And I think that's why there are certain backs that you can absolutely partner with receivers, especially if it's how that team operates. But yeah, I think that alone made this lineup unique this week.
Yeah.
You know, I could have thrown in, you know, Hopkins is there. I could have quite easily thrown in Jalen Waddle, which would have made this a unique lineup again, because there was a few weeks back that the Dolphins receiver stack with Tua was like, it went off. It was fantastic. That won't happen every week, because there's going to be some weeks where you get peaks from Hill, and there's going to be some weeks where you get peaks from Waddle. Having a peak week from both is going to happen less often than it being an often occurrence. So, you know, if I'd have done something like that, that probably would have made the lineup quite unique, despite the ownership on Hill and Waddle probably being a little bit higher. So it's things like that I would encourage people to do when building the lineups, is just think about ways that you can get unique and get a little bit different to the rest of the field.
Yeah, the thing about ownership, and we'll talk about this in more detail another week, but just to give you a really quick example, in a 100-man field, you can have a unique lineup with a ownership sum of 801%. You know, that's 800% owned players and 1% owned player, and it would still be unique, because it's like, you know, and it's 801%, and nobody's going, oh yeah, you should play that. It's like, you know, everyone was going no. So I think, but we'll talk about that a little bit more detail and stuff another point. But first of all, I don't think I've said this to you yet, but congratulations on this. It's a great lineup. In actual fact, it looks a great lineup and stuff. The thing you're talking about the funny line stack, it's funny you said about the Etienne one, because I want to talk about him a bit tonight. And also, I've got another great example of a funny stack, which I think could be really good this week. So there you go.
Yeah, just in answer to, we got a question there from Danny. Which tools do we use for projections, ownership, etc.? Fantasy national equivalent? Is it Run the Sims? I don't subscribe to Run the Sims, because for how I play, it's too pricey. There are websites out there that you can use that will give you projections for free. It will give you ownership for free, though that won't necessarily be as accurate as some of the sites that you might subscribe to. I mean, me, Mark, I don't actually subscribe to one at the moment. Though if I was, I've heard Rise and Fall is quite good. Fantasy Cruncher, people are always harp on about, is really good for its projections and ownership, and the ability to use the optimizer to build your lineups if you're multi-entering. But there's a lot of websites out there. I guess the best answer I could give to a question like that, Danny, is consider how much you're actually playing, how much you're entering, and how often you're returning as well. Because if you're going to be spending $30-$40 a month on one of these projection, ownership, optimizer, exclusive articles kind of subscription services, and you're not at least returning that yield in what you're entering, then it's a waste of money, really. You might as well put that into trying to build more lineups and win the money back that way. You've got to at least break even on what you're putting into it, and then obviously there's more to consider as well, like time and stuff. But yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think the thing about using optimizers and paying for it is, if you build bad lineups by hand, you're not going to build better lineups using optimizers. You're just going to build more bad lineups. It just allows you to build lineups for better. Think about using projections from another site is, if you're using the same projections as other people, you're going to end up with very similar lineups to everybody else. And like you say, the volume that you play comes into it. If you're going to pay, like, I mean, Roto Grinders at the moment is like $50 a month or something, or 50 or 60, I think it is for the NFL. You need to be playing, like, what I reckon you probably need to be able to be playing about $500 a month to make that worthwhile. So otherwise, just don't forget, you're going to lose. You're not always going to win. Just having an optimizer. If you hand build bad lineups, you just optimizer just lets you hand build. To build bad lineups quicker. For me, I don't use anything for projections at all. because the way I play isn't projection based. As you know, I spend all my time thinking about how other people are going to play and try and take advantage of that. I do currently use Fanshare Sports for the ownership projections, which I find very accurate and stuff and is very reasonable. But I don't, like you, Nick. I've cut down my DFS NFL sort of bankroll this year anyway. But so it just doesn't make any sense for me to have an optimizer.
One thing, and the ownership projections won't be accurate, and in terms of the actual statistical projections, they're not going to be completely accurate. But if you're looking for a website that's going to give you that information for free, Danny, just to sort of see, the gauge on what kind of players may perform or where the value might lie. I don't know how they stack up in terms of their NFL projections, but RotoWire is a free website. It offers free articles. It offers free data. And I have been dipping into the college market a little bit this year, and I'm getting a lot more familiar with the players. And I'll be honest, the only thing I've really looked at when I've been building college lineups is RotoWire, just to sort of see if there's value players that I can spot on there. And some of them have been, reasonable projections looking back. You won't hit 100% of the time because there'll be a lot of variables and a lot of different things that will happen in the game that will impact that. And that goes for any player, not even just the value players. That could be one of the top players on the slate. They could be projected to score 30 points. They could finish the game with 11. But yeah, I think you just be cautious, obviously, if you're using stuff like that. It depends how you play, like Mark said. If you're not a projection-based player, if you're going off more like a game theory kind of thing, I would consider that as well. But yeah, I've always found that RotoWire is... though not completely accurate, it's a free service, and I would say anyone that's just looking for an idea of a projected score and maybe what kind of ownership you might be looking at, it might be worth looking on a site like that just to start with, just so you get more familiar with the data as well and what you're actually looking at.
Yeah, I mean, two things about projections is, number one, projection isn't a prediction of what's going to happen. People always think projections are a prediction of what's going to happen. They're not. It's just a mean. It's just a mean of a floor and a ceiling number based on a normal distribution curve of results of that player and stuff. So, you've got to understand that a player's got a projection of, say, 20. It could be that their range of outcomes generally comes between 15 and 25. But equally, a player with a projection of 20 could also have range of outcomes between 5 and 35. So that's number one about projections. Number two about projections or anything like this is if historical statistics could really predict the future of this stuff, what's going to happen on the field, we'd all be winning this, wouldn't we? Because the stats are there for everybody to see. The stats are there. That's why when I first doing this, I've gone through various stages in my DFS sort of life. And I've gone through stages where I was just like trying to predict the games, trying to look at the matchups and stuff, trying to predict the scores, etc., and all this sort of thing. And ultimately, I don't think anybody. Well, we can't predict the future. Again, your troublesome crystal balls come to mind, Nick. And I think it's true as projected. So that's the other thing about using tools and stuff is if you're going to spend money on it, you need to understand what you're actually getting. And I think, but I think Jack, friend of the show, Jack, has been commenting on this stuff and stuff. He's used everything. I mean, I've used a lot of them as well, but he's definitely used more than I have. And I know he uses it on the Sims at the moment. I did like them last year for Showdown as well. But yeah, I was spending a lot more money, playing a lot more money than last year, so made it worthwhile. So yeah.
If you're not sure on where you're looking, Danny, drop me a DM after or during the show after. Just I'm saying drop me a DM because Mark knows that when this show goes off air, the first thing I do is I go and jump in the shower. So I'm quite susceptible to just forgetting to message you back at that point. So drop me a DM and I'll point you in the direction. Like I said, RotoWire is not going to be completely accurate. It's a free service, but it's probably for someone that's new to it. And like you said, 5 months ago, didn't know what a tight end was. It might be a good starting point. And I'll be honest, I've used it for college this year and found it fairly useful at times in a sport that I wasn't familiar with a lot of the players, but it has helped me in terms of like highlighting some of the value there. So I'll send you a link over and let you know what kind of things to look at. Mark, I guess 25 minutes in, almost going on 26 minutes in, we probably should have a little chat about tonight's game because there is a game going on tonight between the Eagles and the Texans. Everything is pointing towards an Eagles win, which from a DFS perspective, the obvious thing to do is, if you want to get a little bit different, is to fade the Eagles, not necessarily in their entirety, but playing more Texans players to just in case the unthinkable happens and the Eagles drop again tonight. Can you see anything other than an Eagles comfortable win against this Texans team?
I can't, but I think there's other ways to get different than being that drastic. I think obviously the popular captains will be Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Miles Sanders. I'm guessing they'll be the three most popular captains. So I think if the Eagles defense have any weakness, it's probably they're sort of middle of the table giving up points against running backs. So Dameon Pierce is a possible option for a captain, then the rest of your players will be heavy Philly. Or for me, Devonta Smith, maybe, who we know has the possibility of a ceiling game. He's a little bit Gabe Davis-like without the consistency, which seems quite a weird thing to say. But we know he can suddenly break out for some points and stuff. So again, it'll be a lower owned captain. But I think I'm sort of stacking 5-1, 4-2 Eagles myself, just trying not to use Hurts, Brown, or Sanders in the captain spot.
Yeah, I think Eagles D is a good starting point. I think if you do want to get different, because the cheaper price wise, you can pretty much slot anyone back into your lineup then. But interesting point, like you said, Mark, in the three most recent weeks, they've conceded over 100 rushing yards, almost 150 last week and the week before. So if anything, you would say that a team potentially could have some success running the ball against them. With that said, Houston's passing offense isn't fantastic. So I guess the easy job for Philly tonight would be to stack the box if they can, and just pressure Mills as much as possible as well. Try and force them to throw the ball, playing to Philadelphia's strengths. I personally, I think if I was getting different, I would probably go the Devonta Smith route as well. Maybe even Dallas Goedert, who we've not seen a massive amount of production from this year, but he's still getting quite consistent target share, and it only takes one score from him. And historically, even in an offense where he had to compete with Zach Ertz once upon a time, he was a tight end that cropped up very often when it came to the red zone. So, Goddard could be, he could go a little bit lower on in that captain spot, if you will. I'm expecting AJ Brown's going to be a very, very popular player tonight. Is there anyone a little bit lower down that you would consider throwing in, whether that is in the captain spot or whether it is just within the lineup? Any sort of value plays that you'd spotted?
No, I don't think so. I didn't have to go lower than the kickers, to be honest with you, when I built my primary lineup. The it's there's not. It's one of those weeks where so often when I play these play showdown, I often have like a sub $2,000 player in there or something. The idea being that the other 5 get all the points, and then that one just has to get a couple of points. But there's just too many questions about, especially with like Philly, they got 800 running backs, which is annoying because we know Miles Sanders is the main man basically in that as well. And Houston give up the most fantasy points to running backs of anybody, so that's why I think he'll be popular. Houston is kind of random disarray. God, do you remember the very first season we were doing this? We were talking about Jordan Akins every other week and stuff, and then and every now and again he appears on. Do you remember? Yeah, because he was athletic, and that was also the thing. Yeah, do you remember? He looked athletic, and well, we were so young, Nick, and he appears on Red Zone every now and again, doesn't he? At the moment, so like I think I saw him a couple of weeks ago or something on Red Zone. So, but I just don't see anything down there. Do you?
No, nothing for me either. Like you said, there's always the possibility that with Philadelphia, when you're expecting a big game from someone like Miles Sanders, that someone like Boston Scott pops up. And it could be that, he doesn't have a massive amount of rushing attempts. He might tick over like he is here, 4, 2, 6, 7. But out of the backfield, he could just catch 3 passes and take 2 of them to the house and becomes a massive value play. But there's no guarantees with anyone down this end. And I can't... Yeah, there's not... kind of the athletic tight end that is Jordan Akins. There's possibly a case to throw him in at 1,200, especially if Houston are going to be chasing the game. But yeah, I don't think you need to get that low. Like you said, the kicker's priced around the sort of 5-7 for Kaimi Fairbairn. Elliott at 7,200. I don't think, and I'd be tempted to just go Fairbairn for 2 at 5-7. I don't think you need to go any lower than that, in all honesty. I think I like Smith as the captain.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's who's in there at the moment. But Goddard's consistency is quite good. And also in a showdown, you don't need to necessarily, because depending on how the game goes, you might not need somebody who scores more than what Goddard sort of ran sort of standard 15 points and stuff. Just needs the Philly touchdowns to be spread around a little bit and stuff. And then suddenly Goddard makes a good captain because he allows to get more of those players in and stuff. So obviously, if you're playing multiple lineups, I would definitely have a Pierce captain, Davis Mills, not Brandon Cooks, because I think he's out now. I think I saw somewhere he's out tonight, but I don't know who you do as a pass catcher there, but there you go.
Jack's just said that Teagan, and I'm going to absolutely muller this name, but I'm sure Jack will be proud of me for that, because there's many a name that Jack has mullered in his time. Quitteriano. I'm quite happy with that. We'll go with that. $200. I think he's listed $300 on tight end. He's been activated to the roster today. He is a tight end, or he's listed as a tight end, but they're very thin on the ground at receiver at the moment, Houston, so maybe that's why he's been thrown in there. He might see some work. I mean, priced at 300, you don't really need him to do much at all. Just catch a couple of balls at that price, really. But yeah, you never know. That could be a shout. There's apparently some beat writers are talking about that as well, so could be a way to get different. I'm sure he'd be lower owned. So yeah, I think we'll move on from the showdown, Matt. We'll move to the Sunday main slate. You kick me off with your quarterback.
Okay, so before I start saying that, I should just mention that due to technical difficulties with me and Nick had getting going today, I've literally lost all my notes because they're on another computer that's not there. So I'm having to do this from memory. But I wanted to talk about Justin Fields, to be honest with you.
Justin Fields, okay.
Yeah, from weeks 5 to 8, he's been the quarterback 2 in Fantasyland, which I think would surprise a few people. He's also got the most. I think it's the most rushing yards. I think, and the most rushing attempts by a quarterback in that time. So say he's the QB2. I can really see this Miami-Chicago game being fairly high scoring. They got Claypool, didn't they, in a trade this week, Chicago? Don't know if that's going to help him this week necessarily, maybe next week, but he himself is in such amazing form. I think that you can play naked. And when you were talking earlier about stacks and funny stacks, I think a Fields, Hill and Waddle stack, I think, is very interesting. I really do. Because Hill and Waddle are actually quite expensive, but Fields is a very cheap quarterback. So I think you can make some really interesting lines like that. But I do like this whole game environment, and I particularly like him. And because everybody's been saying on the Twitter how what a bad quarterback he is. I mean, a few weeks ago, people were talking like he didn't have, he could barely throw a ball. And, I don't know if you saw it. There was a video, I think it was Trent Dilfer did on some news program. I don't know if you saw it. And so he's obviously an ex-quarterback, so I trust his opinion more than most. He was saying he'd analysed every play on the All-22 of Justin Fields. He said Justin Fields' eyes were in exactly the right place every single time. And he was putting the ball where the ball was meant to go according to the play. And the receivers were letting him down, or the offensive line was letting him down. So he said he was actually playing well, but everybody else was all around the other piece as well. And this is the element of stuff. When you get these Twitter experts talking about all these players, they don't understand what they're meant to be doing, especially not with quarterbacks, because none of us understand that position other than, there's only like 12 people who can play it well in the world at any one time, it seems, or something. So I think he's had a bit of resurgence fantasy-wise last few weeks. I don't think he's going to be high-owned. I don't expect him to be. And I really like him stacking with, the two Miami wide receivers who are just on fire at the moment.
In fairness to Justin Fields, he doesn't have a great deal production-wise at wide receiver. The best going into this season, the wide receiver one in Chicago was Darnell Mooney. And that was kind of by default. Last year it was Allen Robinson, and Allen Robinson had a really quiet year. Darnell Mooney sort of appeared from nowhere. Anyone that says that Justin Fields isn't a good quarterback, I feel hasn't watched his college career. And he had quite a decorated college career at Ohio State, which you can say what you want about Ohio State and the quarterback transition. Historically, there's been several quarterbacks that have come out of Ohio State and then failed to take the step up in the NFL despite being highly touted quarterbacks. There's a long list of them. But I liked Fields coming into the league, and I'll be honest, Matt, this has gone completely under my radar, this pick, because I was still hung up on the Justin Fields of sort of week 1 to 3 or 4, where his scoring was really poor. His scoring has completely passed me by. I had no idea that in the last 2 weeks, he was a 25-point quarterback. Genuinely didn't know that. So when
would you?
No.
If you just listen to Twitter, you wouldn't get this. Or, you listen to sort of non-fantasy Twitter, I think.
The thing is we've talked about this before as well, about if you're paying up for a quarterback, you're only paying up really for you'd go for a dual threat quarterback. If you're going to pay up for a quarterback now, you're paying up for an Allen, a Hurts, a Kyler Murray, a Lamar Jackson. You're getting a dual threat quarterback here at a budget price in a team that doesn't have a great deal at receiver and isn't all that productive at running back. It's very average in that position. And that's not to say David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert aren't good players. They just don't produce fantastically. The stats across the board are very average. So to get a dual threat quarterback for this kind of price, 5,300, in a game that, as you said, is likely going to be a high scorer, because we've seen that Miami put up a lot of points, but also take it on the chin in the process. They're a very fast-paced offense as well. So there should be a lot of time for the ball to be in play in this game for both sides. So, yeah, I really like that. It's gone under the radar for me, that one. But, yeah, I do really like it. Another player who in recent weeks down there, Mark, that has had a little bit of a resurgence, seems like he's getting a little bit more accustomed to the offense that he's in, probably faces a slightly tougher test this week, but that's Marcus Mariota. Again, another quarterback that can get the job done with his legs when needed. He has steadily ticked along in recent weeks as well, with very similar kind of performances to Justin Fields. He's a quarterback I have my eye on this week. Geno Smith is another. I think I was coming into the season quite pleased that Russell Wilson had left Seattle. But they don't seem to have missed a beat since that's happened. And Geno Smith continues to just tick over with steady quarterback play, efficient in not turning the ball over that often, not always high scoring, and Seattle, an offense that does operate behind a solid ground game, which they seem to be getting at the moment from Kenneth Walker. But I quite like the price of Geno Smith as well down here. And I love any stat that you can put together where, you know, you've got, you take your pick. You can either put Lockett in or you can put Metcalf in. I don't think you can do wrong by playing either of those, because they're both having very similar kind of weeks, week to week. You could even stack both if you wanted to. If you wanted to get different, stack both if you think Seattle are going to be throwing the ball in that game. But on the whole, there's definitely some quarterbacks down here that I like the look of this week. I would even go as low as Trevor Lawrence at 5'2".
Yeah.
Is well in my thoughts this week as well.
Agreed.
I don't think I'm paying up at quarterback this week. I think I'm definitely paying down at the position.
Yeah, I agree. I have my initial builds and stuff. Josh Allen's the best play. There's no doubt about that. He's the best play, but he's so much pricier than everybody else. And one of the reasons I like putting Fields against Hill and Waddle was because Tua's so expensive now, and he should be that expensive. He's earned the right to be that expensive. You know, but if you look at those scores, he's got just on screen there, he's got a 43 and a 32, and then in between he's got a 50. I mean, I know he's had injuries and stuff and all that sort of thing, but like, he's got a 15 there, and a 14 the first week. So yeah, I think I'm tempted to play down as well myself. The Lawrence thing is interesting. I didn't realize. I think I heard today he's been 3 times. He's been in top 10 quarterbacks or something like that this year, or something like that. Something like that. So he's clearly got a ceiling.
Yeah,
and they're home. The Raiders are pretty terrible defensively. Yeah,
that's what I'm drawing on. He looked quite poor in London, I thought, last week, Trevor Lawrence. There's a lot of underthrowing, overthrowing, poor decision-making. But he's shown enough this year that he's a better quarterback than what we saw last week against Denver, which is a tough defense anyway.
It's one of the toughest.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like that. And I'm definitely paying down at quarterback this week. I've not looked at anyone any lower. I would love to know who's starting in New England. But if it was Mac Jones, I probably wouldn't have any interest there. I don't really have any interest in Bailey Zappi, if I'm being honest. But even him at 5,100 against that Colts team, I wouldn't even say no to that, to be honest. But definitely a week to pay down at quarterback, it seems.
I think you can make a really interesting stack with Trevor Lawrence as well. We talked about weird stacks before. I'm going to get a stack of him, Travis Etienne, and then Evan Ingram. It's certainly of interest as well.
I like that. Yeah,
really,
like that.
For all the reasons we talked about before, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Moving on to running back then, Mark. Eckler, understandably, coming off his bye week, is top of the pile here. He's one of the form backs in the league at the moment after a slow start. Dalvin Cook finds himself up there. Jonathan Taylor looks like he might be a little bit banged up this week. He's been held out of practice again, I believe. You've got Josh Jacobs up there, Aaron Jones against Detroit, who give up a lot of points to running back. So there's some good matchups here at the top. Are you looking at the top, or are you paying down at this position?
I'd be interested to see the ownership projections for Aaron Jones because it's such a good matchup for him. And if you look at the last couple of weeks, he's kind of got there 1 week on the ground, 1 week in through the air. And has AJ Dillon been injured or something? Or I can't remember if he's something. There's the reason why he's got so much work this time. But these last couple of weeks, Aaron Jones.
Yeah,
was he fumbling or something? Can't remember now. But anyway, I think there's so many good options there. I think every option there pretty much is good. Leonard Fournette is barely going to be owned, I would have thought. And he's at home to your beloved Rams, who, see. I know they're half decent against running backs. But yeah, I think he'll be. I think he could be very low owned, and I still think he's a better running back than his fantasy points are showing overall. So yeah, I just think there's so many good options there. Somebody up there though will go low owned. There'll be somebody up there who's the play for that. I don't hear it at the moment. I do like the Travis Etienne usage is just fantastic though, isn't it? It's
it's increasing week on week, and his last couple of weeks, I thought he had more receptions, more yards than that last week, but obviously not. That can't be ignored, and like you said, that Vegas D seems a bit soft across the board.
But you talked about ownership earlier. Sorry, talk about quickly on Travis Etienne. Talk about ownership earlier. Travis Etienne will be very popular because he's too cheap, basically, I think. But how many people are going to put him with, say, Lawrence and Evan Ingram? Or just say Evan Ingram? And that's all you do. That's how you mitigate that ownership,
Yeah.
Sorry. Just one quick.
No, I was just going to say Mixon's having a quieter season this year than he did last year. I suspect of these top price running backs, he's probably going to be him and Fournette. I think will definitely be the lower owned. I think you'll sort of see from Josh Jacobs a dip in ownership, and then the ownership being picked up again, like you said, around Etienne. I think Ramondre Stevenson will garner some ownership again this week.
Yeah.
4 weeks in a row now, he's scored over 20 points. And as I mentioned a few weeks back, the main reason I favoured him over Harris was the work that he's getting as a receiving back as well. Really like that usage when I saw it, and it's only increased since. So I suspect he'll be a popular play this week. Kenneth Walker continues to chug along for Seattle, though a little bit of a quieter week last week. Mostert's having some success in Miami as well, so it might be that he is a popular play this week against, again, Chicago, fairly soft against the run. There's a lot of
That's a great leverage play, brother. That's a really good leverage play, isn't it, Mostert? Because lots of people are going to play Hill and Waddle, and so that makes him automatically a great leverage play. Let's say Chicago were got the fourth most points to running backs and stuff. So Yeah, I'm just there's just something about that backfield. Just you definitely feel uncomfortable playing Mostert though, even though
Yeah,
logic says it's a good play. I think you never feel comfortable playing him.
yeah, definitely. And they go and trade for who was the back that they brought in? Jeff Wilson, who
Jeff
was
Wilson, yeah.
Mostert's understudy in San Francisco when he was there. It feels like they've got two quite similar backs there, in all honesty. But if you bring someone in like that, it's always going to muddy the water a little bit. And in this first week that they have him, is he someone where they try and get him touches as often as possible, get him involved in the offense? Maybe, I don't know. It does put me off a little bit though, that. But then it starts getting a little bit murky around this area now. You've got a lot of questionables, a lot of handcuffs, bit part running backs that don't necessarily see a massive amount of carries. AJ Dillon, you mentioned him, Mark. I had a look at he just doesn't seem to be getting it done. He's had some opportunities this year, but he just doesn't seem to be getting it done.
How can he not get it? He's got those thighs that everyone keeps talking about in the off-season. How can he not be scoring points? Naheem Hines obviously going to Buffalo could be interesting, but they've never, this sort of current regime in Buffalo have never really maintained a fantasy running back, have they? So I don't know whether that's because they haven't had anybody good enough, or was the system? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the thing with Hines is he's proved his worth as a receiving back. Maybe that is the kind of running back that they want in that backfield there. Maybe it is someone that can just come out of the backfield. I mean, Diggs, Davis, it's everything else that they've got then at receiver is a bit, Dawson Knox, McKenzie. It's just a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Hines starts to sort of become the third receiver there, if you will, especially if he's getting a lot of the snap share in Buffalo. Yeah. Don't know. I thought that was a bit of a weird trade because it is a bit of a running back graveyard. The running back one in Buffalo feels very much like Josh Allen most weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I do wonder. You was talking about Buffalo. I haven't seen much buzz or anything on the socials about Buffalo, and I wonder if, even though they're clearly the best play because they're the best team playing. I mean, well, them and Philadelphia on this slate they're the best team playing. I wonder if there'll be a lack of ownership, or they'll be under-owned really for what you should be, because they are the best team. They got, anyway, you just got me thinking about it, talking about Naheem Hines. Antonio Gibson has been getting the, since Taylor Heineke's been back. Antonio Gibson's been getting a little bit of a look. Him and McLaurin both sort of had an uptick since Heineke's come back. I mean, McLaurin's amazing. He's just like, Heineke just throws the ball up for him in single, man coverage and just says, get the ball. And he does. It's just that catch he made last week. It's like amazing. Yeah, just contested ball. But there's no doubt he's going to get it and stuff, isn't it? As long as he's not double covered, there's almost no doubt he's going to get it. So, yeah, that was a very exciting game last week.
Yeah, I agree. He's one of my favourite receivers to watch, McLaurin. If I'm honest, I wish we had someone like that at the Rams to partner with Cooper Kupp. Yeah, I mean, we get to this territory now, and it's a little bit murky this week at running back around this area. I think there doesn't appear to be the obvious bargain play like there has in previous seasons, unless maybe one of these questionables a little bit higher up goes down. If Jonathan Taylor goes down, for example, there's maybe a case to be made for Deion Jackson.
But it's a terrible matchup, though. It's a terrible matchup. Yeah, that's the only thing about it. I would recommend people just steer clear. I just think it's a bad matchup, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is an awful matchup, to be fair. So yeah, I think I'm definitely targeting this kind of area around that sort of 6,000 to 6,500 mark. There's quite a few in that area that I quite like this week. We'll move on then to the wide receivers, Matt, before we cover off our favourite two positions to finish. So wide receivers this week, unsurprisingly, we've got Tyreek Hill at the top of the pack. Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Hopkins has been making a positive impact since his return, and is eaten into everyone's target share as we expected he would. Doesn't look like he's missed a beat whilst he's been out of the game for the first 6. Receivers at the top end, obviously, I know you're going to have some bargains up your sleeve, Matt, but anyone at the top end that you've got your eye on this week as a definite, I'm going to play, and I don't care what anyone thinks?
Oh, I'm definitely playing Jalen Waddle across most lineups, just because of the price between him and Tyreek Hill. Try not to overthink it, really. Weather's meant to be good, by the way, in the weekend in Chicago, which is nice. I think he's the one who gets less ownership than Tyreek Hill, so that's why I like to play him. He's got the same ceiling as Tyreek Hill as well. That's been proven.
Big playability.
At the top, I mean, I know that Washington is susceptible, so I know that Justin Jefferson is a good play, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see though if Devontae Adams comes back after he had the flu last week, and I think it was clearly affecting him. And I think people maybe this week, maybe his ownership, Adams' ownership would be a bit low, and probably it shouldn't be, because he's going to be in a good game environment. So I suspect he might be the lowest owned of those higher placed players, and if he is, I would definitely lock him in.
I'm a little bit concerned about Jefferson because he's just not getting the red zone looks. And I think that's impacting on his ceiling a little bit this year. I mean, he's had some ceiling kind of games where he's gone for 147 yards, 154 yards, and he's roped in double-figure targets. But it's these little weeks here, these 6 receptions, 8 targets, 98 yards. The 15.8 points is not bad for a receiver. But when you're paying, that's it. When you're paying top end, 2 times his value isn't really enough. Cooper Kupp this week that's a play that we've said for weeks. Just play him, don't worry about it. But I'm concerned about that ankle. Very concerned about it. I'm not playing any Kupp this week, I don't think.
I took him out my fantasy team season long as well, just in case. Because what happened with Jamar Chase, where it all looked like it was going to be okay, and then it was suddenly he's out for 4 weeks. And on Wednesday, Thursday, when people were setting the lineups, we thought that he was actually going to be okay.
Yeah.
So just to be safe, and obviously, it's like even just for those last 5 weeks, you can see that 2 16-point performances Cooper Kupp, which is nowhere near enough if you're going to be. I mean, his price has come down quite a lot. But yeah, I mean, the Rams are a funny team at the moment, aren't they, Nick? You probably know that better than anybody else. And you would have thought
funny's not the word I would use, but
yeah, I'm being polite. And the Rams against Tampa Bay, you think would be the game of the week and everything, wouldn't you? Before you see when the season schedulers were doing this, you say that's the game for this week. And I think it's got the bookies over under for it is set at 42 or something like that. Something really
give me
low.
The under.
Yeah, exactly. It's like load up on the defenses, and So I think our usual. We might adjust our death taxes and Cooper Kupp for a little bit until we see something else more consistent.
Yeah. The one thing with Cooper Kupp that I will say is he still, despite being covered, he still finds ways to not be covered. Yeah. He still goes and scores a touchdown. Last week in that embarrassing loss to San Francisco, if we're being honest. But Yeah, it just imploded in the second half. I'm not going back there this week. I'm quite concerned about that ankle. I almost want him to just have a week off, if I'm being honest, and whatever happens in Tampa happens. I'd rather we didn't rush him because he's a vital part of that offense. A little bit further down the charts, I know we've mentioned McLaurin, Mark. You mentioned about Justin Fields. Is there any interest there at all to stack one of the Chicago receivers with him, or are your eyes elsewhere?
No, I'm happy to play him naked. I mean, in my notes, I've got any fit Charger wide receiver is also an option because it's a fantastic matchup against Atlanta, but the look at all those Qs and outs and stuff. So Mike Williams is definitely out.
So it's looking like a big game for Eckler. It's looking like double-figure targets for Eckler out of the backfield.
Yeah, and potentially you could again one of your, we'll call it a Nick stack. You could have an Eckler plus a Deontay Carter or something like that.
Yeah, that is a lot of questions.
Palmer.
I think that Gerald Everett becomes very appealing.
Yeah.
With these
as well,
Qs.
Atlanta are pretty bad against tight ends as well. So, Atlanta's defense is bad against everything. But I think Eckler and Everett are definitely interesting as a combo.
Before we move on to Everett and the tight ends, Matt, any value plays down here?
No, I think we talked at the beginning about how the pricing has changed. I feel like there's so little decent options. I mean, I think you can also take a punt on someone like McKenzie of Buffalo because he will have he's going to have a ceiling week at some point. Who knows? Maybe Chase Claypool will go in with a splash. I don't know how much of the playbook he'll know by then. You've got Garrett Wilson, who at one point was almost like a cash game play, wasn't he? With the number of targets he was getting for his price and stuff. But he's just, I mean, that Jets offense is just, I think they were better with Flacco. And obviously losing Breece Hall did make a big difference. Hunter Renfrow, who you remember last year was an absolute PPR machine. He's vanished pretty much with Mac Hollins being there.
Yeah,
and Adams and stuff. So I don't see any value there and stuff. Do you particularly?
No, when I got down to this part last week, obviously I threw Garrett Wilson in last week into my winning lineup. Off the cuff, really, I had no plan to throw him in. It's just the money I was left over with. He felt like the best fit. It really is poor. It really is poor. Paris Campbell's popped up a couple of times in recent weeks. But New England's a tough matchup this week for the Colts. There's going to be a week where they bounce back. KJ Osborne gets the occasional target when you least expect it. But he's not done any. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say he's not done anything really of note in recent weeks where you could sort of hang your hat on it and say, well, at least we've seen him perform like this one week. He's not really done much at all. No, it's poor down here. Really is.
Terrace Marshall has a kind of looked quite good since PJ Walker's been in. But there he is. Oh, it's gone blur now. He's but again, it's I'd rather balance my lineup and not have to go that low. You know. But I think this is part of the thing we're talking about. The pricing has changed. DraftKings have changed the way they do their pricing. You know, so definitely made it. You have to make more, choices, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
He was somebody I was interested last week. Zacchaeus, he only had one catch.
Yeah, I feel like the one catch that he had is the catch that I saw because I was expecting more than one target, one reception last week. But the one that I must have seen on Red Zone seemingly is the one that he caught. I thought that there would be a little bit more there in terms of work, but hey ho. We'll move on to the tight ends then, Mark. We've just mentioned Gerald Everett there as a good player this week, but he is on the pricier side of the tight ends at 4,800. Justified, I would say, because he has been one of the more consistent tight ends this year. Are we paying down here as well?
I mean, Evan Ingram at his price for the targets he's been getting is just seems like too much value to me.
He looked underpriced this week.
3-3. Yeah. And you haven't got a Kelsey or a healthy Mark Andrews or anything like that and stuff on this slate. So, and the rest of the position is generally pretty poor. First of all, shout out to Jordan last week for picking up Tyler Conklin. He was the highest scoring tight end, and Jordan picked him. So well done, mate, for that. Do you think TJ Hawkinson, one of my least favourite players, is going to make an impact in Minnesota? I mean, I don't think he would do this week anyway. Washington are very good against tight ends, but yeah, I think it's just going to be more of the same from him. Yeah, so Gerald Everett's my favourite at high price, and I think he'll be quite popular though. I think if you want to potentially be different, maybe playing Zach Ertz is a good way, but he just doesn't score. He hasn't got ceiling game in him anymore, has he, Zach Ertz? That's the only downside of it. So yeah, as ever, pretty uninspiring position, really.
Yeah, I think interesting with Hawkinson moving to the Vikings because obviously O'Connell is the head coach there, and O'Connell, I think, really liked Higbee when he was at the Rams as the offensive coordinator. And I think you're getting a similar kind of tight end with Hawkinson as you are with like a Higbee, very similar kind of player. So, though I know that you've got a very much a love-hate and mainly hate relationship with TJ Hawkinson, Mark, if he was ever going to perform anywhere, a team like Minnesota, you would say, should be able to get the best out of him because they've got the right kind of quarterback that throws the ball reasonably accurate. They've got weapons elsewhere on their offense. So, TJ Hawkinson's not going to command a double team or anything like that. It sort of spells the end of Irv Smith, unfortunately. But I'm interested to see what he does in that offense. I think that is a big pickup by Minnesota. They've suddenly got quite a scary offense. If the defense can get its finger out, they could be one of the dark horses for the NFC.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I guess they already were, but that trade to bring Hawkinson in definitely sort of puts them right at the pinnacle now, I feel. You mentioned about Conklin and George mentioned him last week. I actually like him again this week, though. I think it is a difficult matchup. I'm not really put off by it because of the targets that he sees. I think it is a game where I'm fully expecting Buffalo to win this game comfortably. I think the Jets are going to be throwing the ball, and one thing Buffalo do is get a lot of pressure. And quarterbacks that are under pressure have less time to throw the ball. The looks aren't going to be downfield; they're going to be short passes underneath, I think, and that's where Tyler Conklin should still see the targets this week, despite that tough matchup. And I think because we're not talking receiver or running back here, we're talking tight end. So I'm happy to take the hit at the position, even if you was to play someone like a Tyler Conklin, and he doesn't do fantastically. He's just a tight end. I'm not that bothered.
Yeah, I don't see I can't see how you're gonna have a tight end go off so much that you have to have them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't see how it's going to happen this week with the plays we've got available and stuff and the way the lineups are being constructed. So I think cheap tight end is kind of going to be very popular. Also, just if people really want to go super cheap, I think I think with Hawkinson gone, the Detroit next cab off the rank is a min price guy called Brock Wright or something like that, and he's I would not recommend him playing him because it wasn't like Hawkinson was getting much work particularly, but if you really want to save, spend down. I think he's 2.5.
Wow, there is a lot of 2.5.
Yeah, I think he's the next one because they say Hawkinson was their main man.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, and he was limited as well, so maybe he won't even play. Maybe it'll be Mitchell. They're the only two I think have had any snaps this year. But
yeah.
I don't think there's any real reason to, other than if you want to save the money and spend that money elsewhere. I can't see any real compelling case just because they're so cheap to be starting.
Yeah, I agree. Will Disley's the other one that I quite like at his price. He doesn't see a massive amount of targets, but again, he's shown to be a tight end that can pop up when it matters in the end zone. He's had a bit of a patchy history with his health, Will Disley, but has been used in exactly the same role when healthy in that Seattle offense. Very much a red zone target for them. So at 3,000 with a defense that's giving up quite a lot of points to tight ends, he's another player that I quite like this week as well.
Those two teams in that matchup are the two worst for giving up fantasy points, against tight ends. So, Disley and Hurts like that.
Disley in the tight end slot and Zach Ertz in the flex. Get yourself unique. Yeah,
exactly. That's the stack.
Rounding us off, Mark, with the defenses, I'm just going to scroll straight down to the bottom because we're not paying 4,000 for a defense. We're not paying 3,800 for a defense. We're paying less than 3,000 for a defense, if we're being honest. So right down here, there's some interesting ones this week. I quite like the look of the Lions against Green Bay. They give up a lot of points, the Lions, but Green Bay really, I was expecting some movement from them at the trade deadline, and we got nothing. I think they are done, in all honesty.
Yeah.
But I get the appeal for someone even cheaper, maybe even the Panthers, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, I quite like the Seahawks and the Commanders down here. The Seahawks this is a classic example, and we see this every year, is just because the team's a certain way at the beginning of the season doesn't mean they're going to be that way all the rest of the season. And the Seattle defense at the beginning of the season was awful, which is why they ended up in so many shootouts. But actually, last 3 weeks they've been against some really good quarterbacks and they've done really well. So I think they're underpriced for their potential for fantasy points, and I think their game log shows that as well. And I think the Commanders are always a candidate to get points from sacks and stuff. From sacks mainly. And I think and then Chase Young could well be back for some snaps this weekend. He could well. So I prefer the Seahawks, but I think Commanders is also an option if you're going to pay down.
Yeah, I mentioned the Panthers because they've consistently been a defense that's ticked over without really having. They've had one ceiling game at 16, but most weeks you sort of getting 5, 6, 7, 8 points out of them. Seahawks is an interesting one. I think, like you said, it feels like they've been in shootout games throughout the season, but even in those games, they've still scored respectably for a defense. If you're getting 7 points from your defense, that's not bad. Some of these games more recently, they've played Arizona in week 6, came away with 14 points in that game, 6 sacks. I think any team that is coached by Pete Carroll's always going to have a bit of a grit to the defense. So I think Seattle at 2.5 is a great play this week, in all honesty. So,
by the way, defense is another example of how DraftKings pricing has changed because they used to go down to like we got a 2,000 this week, but last week it was like 2,002 or 300, I think was the cheapest or something, and it used to be like 1,800, 1,600, things like that and stuff, and then 2,000. So another example of why some of the rules that which people talk about don't apply anymore because the way the pricing has changed, and everything about DFS is about the pricing. Everything about it. It's it's all obvious who the good and bad plays are. It's about the pricing. So
yeah. I'm going to throw together a very, very quick lineup here, Matt.
Yeah, because we've overrun it.
We have. I'm going to start it in reverse with the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to throw in Justin Fields.
I knew you like that pick.
Yeah, you've really gone under the radar with that one. I'm then going to go to receiver, and I'm also going to throw in Jalen Waddle.
This is all me so far. You need to put somebody else.
Well, we both unanimously liked Travis Etienne, so I'm going to throw him in.
You did.
And we both liked Evan Engram.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw him in at 3-3. Which leaves us with quite a bit left on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. This is such a good lineup already.
I'm liking it. Receiver, I think we sort of agreed that it's there wasn't much going on around this region. So if we scroll up a little bit, McLaurin at 5'9", we didn't really talk massively about him. Obviously, we highlighted some of his bigger plays in recent weeks, but that's not a bad matchup.
But he's not. The thing about Terry McLaurin, he's a better real life player than he is a fantasy player. I think.
Fantasy player, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't always score. He doesn't really have great fantasy weeks, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown again this week. Especially if Swift is like clearly injured. Only got like six rushes last week, and afterwards the coaches said that was too many. So
I'm going to throw him in. I'm going to put him in. We mentioned a receiver for LA. The receivers are very much up in the air, so I'm thinking get a little bit unique here and throw Gerald Everett into the flex at 4-8, and it gives us a lot left over for this final running back and final wide receiver. So I guess at running back, Matt, we can either dip back into this pool of sort of 6,000 to 7,000, or we can pay up, get one of the more pricier players like an Aaron Jones, who we both mentioned we quite like.
I'm quite happy to put Eckler in there, to be honest with you. I know again we've got another running back wide receiver double.
We throw him in. We're going to have to dip into this pool of people that we didn't really.
We don't have to. I mean, okay, fine. We can take Eckler out then and put against somebody cheaper. Then
I think let's throw in Aaron Jones. What we left over with 6'4", which sees us at.
We'll have to find somebody.
Boyd's not been bad in recent weeks. He's been getting a lot of targets. Not been getting a massive amount of targets despite Chase being out. Godwin might not be a bad play against the Rams because I think Ramsey will largely be on Evans this week because
he needs some touchdowns, doesn't he, Godwin? He needs some touchdowns. That's what he needs. It could be the week, but he's not lighting it up. It's because Tampa isn't lighting it up.
Lockett's got a questionable tag there. He's limited participant on Wednesday, but I've liked Lockett in recent weeks. But I've liked Lockett as a stack to Geno Smith. I think if I was playing anyone from this region, I don't know. I probably would throw Godwin in. I know we've not talked about him on the show, but I think that's a good matchup this week against the Rams. The Rams secondary is poor. It's rubbish. And they play so much soft coverage, very little press, and I think that benefits someone like a Godwin. I think he can really make a difference in that kind of coverage.
So I think we've got a few different types of stack there. We've got Fields and Waddle. You've got Etienne and Engram, and you've also got a traditional mini stack of Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Mm.
That's
I
pretty
quite like
handy
that
lineup,
team. That it's quite balanced. I quite like it.
I think I'll enter it in the Ashes.
Yeah, why not? We could be sat here next week with another 1,000. Get the sunglasses back out. Get the fake cig back out again. You never know.
It's that picture of you on the pound note. That's what caused all this.
I just wanted to. I wanted to bring that alter ego to the show to kick the show off. Maybe I'll be back next week with the bins on again. Listen, we have overrun. We're an hour and 20 minutes in. I'm well due a shower. Gamble responsibly, everyone. We'll catch you again next week. Catches for sure, touchdowns for dough. Enjoy the football on Sunday. See you then.